So the Times now, Paul, and an end to the train strikes, which have been such a devastating inconvenience to the 3% of people who still leave their house to go to work in the morning.
Good point. Train drivers accept 15% pay deal, ending 2 years of strikes. I don't think there was any negotiation involved. I think they just went, how much do you want? But anyway, drivers at 16 train operating companies voted 97% in favour of the settlement, with a turnout of 89%. This is according to ASLEF. And the 3-year deal is worth 9k to most drivers. That's a lot of money, isn't it, over 3 years? And will boost the average salary from what I believe was £64,000 to £73,000 as an average for a train driver. And they will receive, it goes on to say, sort of 5% year one, 4.75% next year, and so on and so forth. And this will also be backdated and added to their pension. So it's a very, very good deal. And, you know, 9k is a big amount. And, you know, part of me is like, good on them. They've done a deal, they've got the money. But 9k would heat a lot of old people.
Well, I think it's a massive... I mean, it's like you get half a Prime Minister for this.
What I think is, perhaps the percentage as a deal is reasonable. I think what strikes me as more disproportionate is what they were starting from. You know, that they feel to me like they're extremely well remunerated for what amounts to a fairly low-skilled job, really. I mean, I don't want to sound like I know everything about it, but we all know the extent to which it's automated and so on now. There's a lot of controls and mechanisms. You're inside, you're in the diet, you're not confronting danger, are you?
You're on a track.
Yeah.
It's not like you can take the wrong route.
It does feel like they've got a pretty good deal. But on the other hand, I mean, as you say, good on them. Anyone who's unionised and can get a wage rise to elevate themselves to the level that inflation has impacted on the cost of living over the last few years would obviously be well advised to do so. Obviously, there are some jobs where it's easier than others.
Blame the player, blame the game, or whatever the phrase is. But it's just at the time when we're hearing about old people starving to death and not being able to heat their houses, I find it so distasteful.
Well, I suppose the thing is, as again, playing devil's advocate to some extent, but there have, you know, it has cost the economy an awful lot of money, the amount of strikes. I live down in Hove, you know, we've been disrupted by it, and I've usually managed to work around it. I haven't actually missed work. I've usually just had to, you know, wait for the next one or go back home and get the car in. But I suspect a fair few million quid has been lost one way or another.
Absolutely.
So does that not just only go to prove that striking works for them and it sets a precedent? Now, and that opens a whole other discussion. It does feel like a lot of money, and it does feel like just bad optics. Again, I keep using the same phrase.
But it's this the trouble when inflation comes in, isn't it? Because we had a couple of decades when inflation wasn't a serious problem and we forgot what it was like. I mean, obviously, Labour governments are another factor when they are beholden to the unions to some extent, but it's much harder to argue for that when inflation is 1 or 2%. But, you know, things have, in aggregate, gone up by 20 to 30% in the last 3 years, you know. And they're not coming back down again.
Well, now that they're happy, do you think we're going to have cheerful staff and a brilliantly running railway? And there won't be...
Absolutely not. That's another 9k if you want that. Free transport scrapped for English-speaking children, but kept for Welsh speakers. So this is Bridgend County Borough Council, and they've said that they've made the reluctant decision to stop providing travel for children aged 4 or under and those 16 or over. However, the local authority will continue to lay on transport free of charge for pupils who attend Welsh medium schools where pupils are taught and converse in Welsh.
Welsh medium.
Yes.
It's like Doris
Welsh
Stokes.
medium. Yeah, exactly. Doris Stokes. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they only speak to dead Welsh people. and maybe they don't understand them, so how can we possibly believe them? But, I mean, it's clearly discriminatory.
It does seem rather, doesn't it?
Normally, I would argue against discrimination, say, well, we're leaning too far around one way. But it is. And what a peculiar thing to choose to discriminate against. The sounds that come out of a child's mouth.
There's no reason
essentially, that's what it is.
That if you're a Welsh speaker, you would find it harder to get into school under your own...
Not at all.
Steam.
I mean, obviously... I don't know if they're using trains or not. But obviously, the solution is to learn Welsh, but you know, it seems a bit much.
Well, that's a good incentive, I guess. Can you see any sense or reason in this?
I can't, but I think the Welsh Conservative Shadow Transport Minister, Natasha Asghar, she's had the best day of her life, hasn't she? This is a shocking decision. She's just clutching her pearls, having a whale of a time.
I would like to see the Welsh language maintained, sustained, encouraged. You know, I do think that's proper diversity and proper heritage and so on. It's a wonderful thing. This seems like a slightly...
We have to do the converse, because that's what we do in the media, is we have to say, what if This was, we were in Birmingham and saying only native English-speaking children could get the bus free.
Well,
it's not dissimilar. It's a good comparison, and it would cause outrage. I think they probably meant to be well-meaning in some way, but they've got it incredibly wrong.
It's fallen down the cracks. Last quick story, down to my local now, Cressida, for a bit of free speech argy-bargy in the Telegraph.
Free speech group kicked out of Brighton pub after saying children shouldn't be taught trans ideology. So it's just as it sounds. I mean, imagine setting up a free speech group in Brighton. Good luck with that. But they tried. They had their little salon thing where they wanted to meet and have conversations and say things like, I don't believe, I'm gender critical, etc., etc. All of that. And the pub weren't having it. The landlord is said to have disapproved of one of the speeches. Speeches? That sounds quite heavy. But anyway, regarding the teaching of gender ideology. And the next thing you know, some security guards come over and ask them to leave. And I'm reluctant to name the security company because I don't think they can do the right thing here, can they?
No, you probably don't. If the landlord says to the security company, we want these people removed from his premises, their premises, so they're a day.
You can name the premises, though, presumably.
Yeah, which is the Southern Bell.
The Southern Bell. So if anyone feels strongly about that issue one way or the other, they can decide
That's where they
not
can
to
go to
stay at the Southern Bell.
Exactly.
Daily Mail, Cressida, Labour has undermined Israel.
Says Netanyahu. Yeah, that's right. So this is it is walkie-talkies now, by the way.
This is a new phrase.
We've moved on.
Oh, goodness, OK.
Pages was day one.
I didn't get the memo, but I suppose even...
Hopefully not,
so, I mean, they'd be scared to touch anything, won't they?
I think and that's exactly right, of course, and they will be. Well, what's very interesting, particularly about the walkie-talkies and the pages, is they're all part of the same purchase, essentially.
Right.
They were intercepted in Hungary, it would appear, and they've been able to get in and inject these things with some sort of a liquid explosive.
Yeah.
And they did the pages, and then 24 hours later they did the walkie-talkies.
And were they done via like a message? Is it like a protocol that you can do over the standard Wi-Fi or whatever that they're generally receiving their messages on?
That would be my guess. Yeah. Because of the nature of the sort of analogue nature of walkie-talkies and pages, it's probably quite straightforward.
Yeah, it's probably not even 4G, is it?
No, I think they would have been using, particularly pages would be my guess, because they're not as traceable as a telephone.
No.
Of course
No, it's because previously in the Middle East, some Hezbollah people had been killed with mobile phones, and so they thought we're not falling for that again.
Wow.
Stopped using mobiles, moved on to pages, and so it's.
So what we should cover this story as well. Then,
yes.
Sorry,
so Labour's undermined Israel, says Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu has accused Labour of undermining Israel.
Our Labour.
Our
British
Labour, yes. Not a fan of Keir Starmer. In an interview with the Mail, Israel's Prime Minister attacked, and then it runs out, and I've only got the front page, so I don't know, did you hear any of this?
Yeah, so there's a bit... So this, I think he's quite clearly referring to the fact that Labour have in the past refused some funding for a minority of weapons to Israel. However, whether it's small, big, indifferent, negligible, whatever it is, Labour seem to really be struggling at the moment. They seem to be struggling. They seem to come across very naive, particularly on the geopolitics. Because if you think about it, how well supported they are in the States, that's essentially a Labour Party over there. It's the Socialist Democrat Party of the States. They're of the same ilk in terms of their politics, but obviously because of the history with the States and Israel, they do support them. But they found a way of messaging it in a way that keeps everybody on board, or most people on board, should I say. Labour is a bit like children running the school. It feels like they're acting up to being grown-ups and they're not quite achieving it at the moment.
I would say in American politics and in terms of voting for relief and weapons and aid and so on to Israel and support, it's much more cross-party as a process, isn't it, there?
For sure.
And there is a very powerful Israel lobby, and there are, historical ties and historical sympathies. I mean, it's quite interesting to me, and this is kind of going off-piece, but Joe Biden never made any secret of his sympathy for the Irish Republican cause,
Not at all.
Of course. And that, traditionally, is very closely allied to the Palestinian cause, isn't it? Which is... So, I mean, I don't know whether he goes around the back in that regard, but...
Who knows?
Probably not out in the open. But Well, I mean, traditionally speaking, it's been basically death, isn't it, for any American politician that does not regard Israel as their greatest ally.
You have to protect it at all costs, it would appear. But it does make, I mean, when you talk about the Irish and Palestine, Israel, and it does make a mockery of the whole thing when you think they'll pick one side and you'll believe they'll be ideologically opposed to something else, when they're not. It's just all politics.
Yeah.
This serves us best.
Telegraph now, Paul. Junior doctors are to get a new name. It reminds me of when Mr. Dog changed its name to Caesar.
Yes,
do you remember that?
I do. Junior doctors rebrand themselves as residents instead of the demeaning job title. So Doctors' Union has voted successfully for the doctors that were called junior doctors to be now called resident doctors because it was misleading because they weren't necessarily so junior. But unless they live in the hospital, resident doctor is also slightly misleading, I would say.
Yeah, it's a weird alternative, isn't it? It doesn't suggest seniority, it suggests locum.
Just there a lot.
Yeah, like hoarders or something.
I don't understand what's wrong with junior doctors. Isn't that still
junior does sound a little bit like Boy Scouts or something, like you've got your doctor badge, you know, but you're not really a professional. I mean, they've usually put in about 8 years of studying, haven't they?
Oh, yeah, you trust them over Lewis Schaefer.
I do get that. They should just call them doctors and then start applying other epithets and qualifiers to see exactly once you were. So you go in at doctors. This
happens with language, isn't it? Somebody comes along well-meaning, tries to tidy it up, and then we just slouch into something else.
Correctness.
Yes.
It's gone mad. We have not got time to do our story about boffins interfering with the traditional British pint, so I do apologise for that.